Welcome to NBK Tech World. In the previous lesson, we learned about JavaScript functions. Now we're going to go a little bit further in our learning of functions. We're going to learn how to add parameters to our functions. Those are the inputs given to the function. Alright, and to do that, we're going to use an example that we previously used. Remember the hello, my name is blank and I am blank years old. We use this to display a message like this, where the first blank would be somebody's name that was stored in a variable called name, and then somebody's age stored in a variable called age. And we display this message to the console using the console log function. Now, what we want to do in this practice, this challenge, the challenge is the following. I'm going to write a function that's going to do precisely this. We're going to do a log of this message, except we're going to take the name and the age as parameters, as arguments to the function. So when I say parameter and argument, they're sometimes used interchangeably. When you're calling a function, you pass the function arguments. When you're defining a function, you typically define the parameters. And those parameters are actually what you give as arguments when you call the function. So keep in mind there's certain slight difference in the usage of the word as depending on the context situation. So let's start writing the function. The first thing you have to say is what's the keyword? Keyword is function, and then followed by a space, followed by the name of the function. Let's call this function say greeting, for example. And then you pass what? You have to write the two parentheses like this, and then the curly brace. And inside the curly brace, you write a set of instructions this function is gonna perform. In this case, we want to do console log, okay, of whatever the message was. Let's use string interpolation. Remember, string interpolation, use backtick, and then here, let's paste the message. Wherever you see the blank, you're going to put the $ with the two braces, and inside this has to be the variable name. Let's call this variable name, and then the other one age, as like we did before. Except now we have not defined these guys previously, right? And we expect these guys to come from the function input, okay? So whoever's going to call say greeting has to provide the name and the age so that the console log is going to display something here in the name and the age. So to do that, you're going to go here, see the parentheses. This is going to be your parameter list. The function takes several parameters, could be 0 or more. In this case, you're going to take the name and the age as parameters. The parameters are listed, comma separated. So first parameter is name. If you want one more parameter, you have to put a comma followed by another variable name. You don't have to have a space here, but by convention, I always put a space here. So I highly encourage you also follow this convention. Okay. So let's just review a little bit what we did. So we're declaring this function, okay, and name is say greeting. It takes two parameters, takes some name and age. Then the instructions to this function inside here, the function body in between the curly braces, is like so. You do a console log of this message, and inside the message it's gonna interpolate whatever value stored in this variable called name and whatever value stored in this variable called age. And these variables just so happens to come from the function parameters. That's the input that is going to be given by whoever calls the sayGreeting function. Okay, so we press enter here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to try calling it like by the name, and then we have to give the input. sayGreeting. Now, first input has to be the name. So you can say your name as a string. Now the second one, it has to be separated by a comma. Has to be the age. I'm going to just make it up like before, like so. Okay, so the function name, and then you give a list of arguments. So when I'm doing the function call, I typically call these guys arguments that are passed to the sayGreeting function, and these are the parameters. So this value is going to be mapped to this variable called name, and this value 35 is going to be mapped to this variable called age, and these will be referenced inside the log here. So let's try it out. So as you can see, after calling sayGreeting, we get the message, hello, my name is my name and I am 35 years old. So let's just look at some other things here in the function. You may notice that I always type like 2 spaces in the function body every time I open the curly brace. That's a indentation convention. It's very common when you do programming. It used to be traditionally a tab, but these days people also do spaces. Because I do web development, I got into the habit of always using 2 space indentation, so I would always add 2 spaces every time after I see opening curly brace, like in the function definition, to make things look nice and see, oh, okay, this is part of the body of the function and not something else like on the same level. You can look into that if you want to get to know that more. It's just a convention that makes the code easier to read, as you have a lot of code working with a huge, like a GRUD code base. So that's a good style and practice you should be following from early on in your learning. So I strongly suggest you always put the indentation when you see a opening curly brace. Add say in my case I always use 2 spaces. You can use 4, but web development typically 2 these days. All right. So other thing I want to point out is we haven't really used a semicolon before, and this is something that you would always add at the end of every statement. Okay, so this is a statement right here, and at the end you put a semicolon. So this comes from programming in the C language. Every statement has to end in a semicolon, but when JavaScript came about, it's not really like necessary to have it, but people add it anyway just to be consistent, and you might end up having some bugs because you forget to do some things or combine statements. But so the take is there are people who like to have it versus people who don't want to use it. In my case, I always like to have it, so that's my recommendation for you. But you don't have to follow my standard. Feel free to look into that, do some research, and choose your side. I will always put a semicolon when I'm writing JavaScript here, like a write a function, a statement, at the end of the statement, semicolon. Okay. I didn't do much of this before when I started the course because we're just doing the JavaScript console. We're not really writing program source files. But if we had like a big program in an actual external file, it's not just the console, I would always add the semicolon. So you might not see me adding semicolon every time here, and that's because of that. Like I didn't add a semicolon here, but you actually could have added. So it doesn't hurt to add one, all right? So keep that in mind as you walk in your journey. So enough of that. So thank you for watching, and just a little bit review before we end the video. So we learned how to define our own function with parameters. Parameters can be none, like we did before, say hello. There was no parameter, but now we made a function called sayGreeting with 2 parameters. If you have more than 1 parameter, separate them with a comma. Okay, and then these parameters they'll be mapped according to how you pass the arguments when you call the function. It'll be in order. My name will be mapped to the first argument parameter here. 35 will be mapped to the second here, and those will be available as a variable inside the function body, like I did here. All right. So, and what's good about this is that you can say reading with different inputs and get different outputs. So if say another name and 29, I forgot to say the quote here. If you say like this, you expect a different message. So you're going to say, hello, my name is another name, and I am 29 years old. And you can try with different inputs and see the different outputs that you get. That's an exercise I'm going to leave to you to try different things with the sayGreeting method, okay? So thank you so much for watching. Until the next time. Bye.